Human Metalsmith forged Unbreakable blade. Alien warrior's debt lasted forever. The copper sky above Ardent Reach flickered with the haze of midday, the steady thrum of the settlement's life support towers humming in the background. Bram worked the anvil, muscles flexing beneath his soot-streaked skin, sweat trickling down the ridge of his brow. Sparks leaped from the blade he hammered, each strike a small defiance against the relentless, arid heat. The air stank of hot iron and recycled oxygen, the rhythm of his labor so familiar that he barely noticed the distant sound at first. Then it shattered, an unearthly howl, high and sharp, rising above the din. The ground vibrated as engines roared, a rumbling deeper than thunder, closer than any storm. Bram's hammer paused mid-strike. He looked up, squinting through the forge's swirling haze. A sleek craft tore across the sky, its hull gleaming obsidian, edges honed like a hunter's fang. It was Terran-made, no mistaking the brutal elegance, the way it hovered with disdain for gravity or protocol, bypassing the main landing pads to drop with predatory grace near his solitary workshop. Wind from its descent whipped embers across the yard. The hatch slid open with a hiss, and the settlement seemed to hold its breath. Out stepped Sira. She moved with lethal poise, crimson skin glinting beneath the sun, black horns curving high and proud from her brow. Her hair, a wild, untamed green, framed a face both fierce and haunted. Emerald eyes swept over the human's domain, metal scraps, racks of unfinished blades, the stubborn order Bram imposed on chaos. She looked unimpressed, her gaze dismissive, but there was something taut in the set of her jaw, a shadow in her stare. "You are the Terran Smith," she declared, her voice low and edged with something that was not quite anger, something brittle, unyielding. The syllables carried the weight of command, but also the echo of loss. Bram set his hammer down, unhurried, and wiped his brow with the back of his hand. He studied her openly, noting the intricate armor that hugged her body. Dark plates etched with alien runes, clan symbols worked into every seam. She was not here to barter for trinkets. "Depends what you need pierced, Terran," he replied, his tone easy, but his eyes sharp. He gestured to his workbench, a scatter of tools gleaming in the forge light, chisels, tongs, and hammers, each one shaped by his own hand. "Steel's honest, but it won't cut every truth. Tell me about your beast." Sira's lips pressed together, pride flaring in her stance. "The night maw. Its hide turns our blades. Its shadow drinks our fire. I need a weapon that can end it." She hesitated, a flicker of something fragile passing across her face. "My clan, my honor, depends on it." Bram nodded, thoughtful. "You want a miracle. Miracles take details. What does it eat? How does it move? Where does it bleed?" His questions came blunt, hammering at the armor of her composure. "I don't just forge metal, I break barriers. If you want this, you'll give me what I need. Truth, patience, and nothing that doesn't belong to this land." Sira's hands curled into fists. "Your price is high, Terran. My honor is at stake. If you fail, your life is forfeit." She said it without hesitation, but desperation trembled beneath the threat. Bram shrugged, a lopsided grin playing on his lips. "Fair trade. I've wagered worse." He crossed to the forge, beckoning her closer. "But first, you'll learn the forge's will. Not just its heat, but its spirit. And you'll learn to wait." Sira hesitated, the pride in her eyes warring with the need that had driven her here. At last, she stepped forward, letting the hammer's song and the promise of fire draw her in. Bram placed tongs in her hand, guiding her to the bellows, showing her where to stand so the heat licked but did not burn. Thus began the forging, Bram's hammer ringing out a new song in ardent reach, Sira drawn into the dance of fire and steel. Sira set the alloy case down on the workbench, the sleek silver tiles marked with Terran glyphs, glowing faintly beneath her fingers. "We use these in the high forges of Harkon, nanite bonded, resistant to phase disruption, nothing stronger in the sector. She opened the case, revealing ingots of opalescent metal, each pulsing with a cold internal light. Pride colored her voice, but Bram only cast a glance at the gleaming Terran marvels and shook his head. "Pretty trinkets," he said, dismissing the alloys with a careless wave. "Too perfect, too clever. I want ore that's fought the ground and won." He turned away from her offering, moving to the racks that lined his workshop, where rough stones in shades of iron, copper, and obsidian waited beneath a thin layer of dust. Syrah watched, her brow furrowing. No one rejected Terran steel. He selected each stone with a reverence that surprised her. "This one," he said, hefting a chunk of blue-gray ore, "has the bones of mountains in it. Strength." He let it fall to the table with a satisfying thud, then picked up another, this one shot through with pale, crystalline veins. "This one gives the edge, sharp, but fickle if you don't listen." His hands caressed the stones, feeling their weight, tapping each with a knuckle and listening for some hidden music. "You judge metal by sound?" Syrah's voice held skepticism, but also an undercurrent of curiosity. "By sound, by feel, by smell, even." Bram cracked a rock open with a practiced strike, revealing a glittering core. "Every ore tells a story. You want a blade that kills nightmares. You use what's born of this land, not some foreign miracle." He rolled his shoulder, muscles shifting under his shirt, sweat darkening the fabric. "You want to learn? Start with respect, for the metal and for the work." Syrah hesitated. She was Terran, a warrior, not a laborer, but necessity gnawed at her pride. She set aside the alloys, stepping closer to the table. Bram's gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat, then he pushed a stone into her hands. Its roughness bit her palms, its weight unfamiliar. "First, crush it. Feel its resistance. Don't fight, just follow the break." He placed a hammer in her grip, guiding her swing. Syrah braced herself and struck. The ore split, but not cleanly. Bram chuckled. "You're used to machines doing the listening for you," he said, taking her hand, steadying her. His touch was calloused and warm, grounding her in a way that made her pulse quicken. The forge blazed higher as Bram fed fresh ore to the fire. Smoke curled in thick, scented waves, iron tang, scorched earth, and beneath it all, his sweat, rich and human. Syrah found herself breathing deeper, her senses overwhelmed by the physicality of it all, the heat that clung to her skin, the grit beneath her nails, the muscle ache in her arms. "It's a bond," Bram explained, voice soft but intense as he stoked the flames, "between smith, metal, and intent. You don't force it, you guide it, you listen." His gaze flicked to her, searching for understanding. "Some think forging is about brute strength. But it's music, Syrah. You strike the wrong note, the whole piece falls apart." Syrah shook her head, struggling to hide her frustration. "Your methods are primitive. On Harkon, the forges are clean, silent. We program what we want, and it appears." She watched as Bram dipped tongs into the molten pool, withdrawing a strip of glowing steel. The color was alive, cherry red, then gold, then a white so bright it hurt to look at. He grinned, sweat gleaming on his jaw. "And how did that work for your nightmaw problem?" His words cut, but there was no cruelty, just a challenge. She opened her mouth to reply, but found herself at a loss. Instead, she watched as Bram hammered the metal, each strike ringing out, a rhythm that wormed its way into her bones. He moved behind her, guiding her to the bellows. "You control the heat. Too much, you break it. Too little, it bends." His hands closed over hers, his body flushed to her back. The heat of him was as real as the fire, his presence a solid, unyielding pressure. Syrah tensed, unused to such nearness, but Bram's voice soothed her, low and steady. Feel the rhythm. Match it. Their hands moved together, working the bellows. The fire roared, the flames hungry and alive. Sira felt the music he spoke of, the pulse of metal, the rush of heat, the thrum of their bodies moving as one. She closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her disciplined mind flickering with unfamiliar longing. Bram leaned in, his breath stirring the fine green hair at her temple. Good. Keep it steady. His rough thumb grazed her wrist, and Sira's heart stumbled in her chest. She was used to the cold discipline of command, the distant click of machinery. This was something else entirely. As the day faded, the forge's glow deepened, and Sira lost herself in the work. She learned to judge the metal by the color of its light, the texture under her hammer, the way the sparks danced. Bram's teachings were simple but profound. Trust the material, trust your senses, trust the process. She found herself looking for his approval with every step. The nights brought a quieter magic. The forge banked, the air cooler, the world beyond the walls falling away. Sira sat across from Bram, sweat drying on her skin, armor unfastened at the throat. The silence was companionable, broken only by the crackle of dying embers. Bram sprawled on a workbench, arms folded behind his head, eyes catching the last glint of firelight. Terran tech is impressive, he admitted, voice easy. But sometimes the old ways have teeth. There's power in getting your hands dirty. Sira arched a brow, lips curling into a faint smile. Efficiency is not weakness, Terran. Our forges build fleets, shape worlds. Bram chuckled, the sound low and intimate in the darkness. Yet here you are, because your ways failed. He didn't say it to wound, just to remind her why she had come. Sira found herself unable to argue. She watched him in the half-light, the lines of his face softened by exhaustion, the raw strength in his hands, the way he looked at her without fear or awe. It unsettled her. It thrilled her. On the second night, Bram broke the silence first. What drives you, Sira? It can't be just honor. His gaze was searching, honest. She hesitated, fingers tracing the edge of a cooling blade. I lost warriors under my command. The Nightmaw killed them, and my clan demanded vengeance. I failed them. If I cannot kill the beast, I am nothing. Bram's expression softened. You're more than that. The metal doesn't care about failure, only what you do with it next. Sira looked away, but his words lodged somewhere deep inside her. The nights blurred into days, each one spent at the forge, each lesson drawing her deeper into Bram's orbit. He showed her the subtleties of quenching, the patience required for tempering, the humility in starting over when a blade cracked. She began to crave the work, the ache in her arms, the honest sweat on her brow. It was intoxicating, the blend of heat and purpose, the silent understanding that grew between them. Sira found herself watching Bram's hands, the way he moved, the quiet pride in his every action. When he laughed, the sound seemed to chase away her old ghosts. On the fourth evening, as the forge glowed low and the desert winds howled against the walls, Bram set aside the unfinished blade. He moved to her side slow and deliberate, his fingers stained with soot and the memory of fire. Sira looked up, the green in her eyes catching the last amber light. He reached out, rough fingers brushing her cheek, a touch both gentle and possessive. Sira stiffened, then leaned into it, surprised by how right it felt. Because this blade will carry both of us, Bram murmured. The words lingered between them, heavier than any steel. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, desire and respect, longing and promise, something deeper was forged, bright and indestructible as the metal cooling on the anvil. The forging was grueling, no hour for doubt or weakness. Bram moved with relentless focus, the world narrowing to the anvil's glow, the hiss of quenching oil, the hiss of his own breath. Sweat poured in rivers down his arms, streaking soot across muscle, beading on his brow. The blade grew beneath his hands, a sliver of molten promise, its edge barely contained by the fire. Each strike of the hammer rang out, a heartbeat, a vow, a challenge to the impossible. Sira watched, transfixed, standing just beyond the searing circle of heat. The rhythms of the forge pulsed through her, electric and irresistible. She saw the blade shimmer as Bram folded the steel, again and again, muscles straining, wrists turning with inhuman patience. The metal drank in the fire, defying all the rules of plasma and nanite and code she'd been taught to trust. It was primal, elemental, and utterly alien to her. "What are you doing?" she whispered, awe stealing her voice. Her eyes, emerald, wide, reflected the shifting colors of the blade. Bram didn't pause, his hammer rising and falling with tireless purpose. "We give it ourselves," he said, voice rough but reverent. "Will, memory, purpose, every blow, every fold, presses us into the steel." Sparks leapt, golden and wild. "This blade will echo your spirit, Sira. It won't just cut. It will break the Nightmaw's hold." He met her gaze, sweat glistening on his jaw, something fierce burning in his eyes. Sira felt a tremor ripple through her, a sense that the world was shifting beneath her feet. She remembered the forges of Harkon, clean and humming, their sterile perfection. This was nothing like that. Here the metal seemed alive, volatile, as if Bram's intent and her need were being drawn in, fused in the fire. She felt her old certainties peeling away, replaced by something raw and exhilarating. She stepped closer, drawn by the gravity of the moment. "You're making a legend," she murmured, unable to hide the reverence in her voice. "Not just a weapon." Bram nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Legends are forged, not built, and they're always born in need." He hammered again, the ring of steel echoing off the walls, driving the point home. They worked through the night, side by side, sweat and effort binding them more tightly than any vow. Sira learned to read the color of the steel, to anticipate Bram's needs without words. She fed the fire, worked the bellows, handed him tongs and cooled his brow with a wet cloth. Exhaustion became a distant memory, replaced by a feverish energy that made her feel more alive than she had in years. As the final fold came, Bram's movement slowed, each one deliberate, almost ceremonial. He lifted the blade from the flames, its surface swirling with colors she had no words for: copper, blue, gold, hints of green that caught the light and held it. He quenched it in oil, the hiss a song of triumph. The air filled with the scent of scorched earth and birth. Sira's heart pounded as Bram lifted the blade with both hands, his arms trembling with spent strength. He laid it across the anvil, examining every inch with a craftsman's scrutiny. Sira moved beside him, her breath mingling with his in the stillness. Bram looked at her, his eyes softening. "It's yours now, Sira," he said, voice rough with fatigue and something deeper. He reached for her hands, guiding her fingers over the hilt, teaching her its weight and balance. "You are part of it. Your purpose, your pain, your hope, it lives in the steel." She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the blade, the way it seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Bram's hands were steady on hers, his body close, radiating a heat that matched the forge itself. A new energy thrummed between them, something that had simmered beneath the surface now sparking into life. Barriers that had defined them, Terran and Terran, smith and warrior, stranger and stranger, crumbled in the firelight. The air crackled with anticipation, their breaths shallow, hands lingering where they did not need to linger. Bram set the blade aside, the metal singing softly as it settled. Without hesitation, he cupped Sira's face in his soot-stained hands, thumbs tracing the curve of her jaw, her cheekbones. Their gazes locked, a silent question passing between them. She answered with a nod, surrendering her usual discipline, letting her desire speak. He kissed her, fierce, unyielding, yet laced with tenderness that surprised them both. His lips tasted of salt and smoke, his touch reverent as though she were as precious as the blade they'd forged. Syrah's hands found his shoulders, pulling him closer, her body trembling with release and relief. The heat of the forge was nothing compared to the fire they stoked between them. Syrah let herself be undone, armor falling away, breath catching as Bram's hands traced the curves of her body. Her disciplined mind surrendered, swept away by sensation, the rasp of his calloused palms, the velvet of his mouth, the thrum of his heartbeat against hers. She pressed her body to his, seeking the union of spirit and flesh she'd only ever dreamed of. The world narrowed to touch, to heat, to the wild drumbeat of desire. They moved together, a dance as old as steel, as new as dawn. The forge cast long shadows as Bram laid her gently among the cooling embers, his body shielding hers. There was urgency, yes, but also reverence, a sense that they were not just taking, but giving, forging something between them as enduring as the blade itself. Every sigh, every gasp, every whispered name became part of the magic. Afterward, Syrah lay nestled against Bram, her head on his chest, fingers tracing the scars that mapped his history. She felt the rise and fall of his breath, slow and steady, grounding her. The silence was rich with meaning, words rendered unnecessary by the depth of what had passed between them. Bram covered her hand with his, entwining their fingers. The embers of the forge glowed low, painting them in shifting gold and red. Syrah closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the truth of their bond settle into her bones. Dawn crept in, pale and gentle. Syrah woke to Bram's arm around her, the weight of his presence anchoring her in a world remade. She shifted, tracing the line of his jaw, then the faded scars over his heart. Bram's eyes opened, meeting hers with quiet understanding. No words were needed. The blade beside them was proof enough of what they had accomplished, together. Syrah rose, wrapping the blanket around herself, watching as Bram pulled on his shirt, the hard lines of his body softening in the morning light. Their glances spoke volumes, gratitude, promise, something unspoken that felt dangerously like hope. Together, they moved to the anvil. The blade rested in its cradle, waiting. Syrah gripped the hilt, testing the balance, feeling the certainty in its weight. Bram stood beside her, his hands gentle as he guided her through the final honing, stone against steel, pressure and patience. With every stroke, their movements became a silent conversation, past and future, fear and courage, pain and healing. The edge grew keener, flawless, ready. Syrah felt the purpose in her chest, fierce and clear. Bram took a final look at the finished blade, then handed it to her with a solemnity that needed no words. "It's finished," he said, voice rich with pride and affection. "Earth, fire, and us, bound together." Syrah lifted the weapon, its spirit thrumming in her grasp. The weight was perfect, the purpose, unmistakable. She met Bram's gaze and knew, whatever awaited, they would face it as one. Their peace was shattered by the blare of an alarm, a sound raw and jagged, echoing through the metal bones of ardent reach. The calm of dawn evaporated. Syrah jolted upright, hand reaching instinctively for the blade at her side. Bram was already moving, muscles taut, eyes sharp with battle readiness. Sirens wailed, red lights splintering the dusty air, and above it all rose the shouts of terrified settlers and the rumble of distant explosions. "They're coming for the core," Bram growled, voice tight with urgency. He snatched up his hammer, the weapon heavy and comforting in his grasp. Syrah's fingers curled around the hilt of her blade, their blade, feeling its spirit pulse in time with her own racing heart. The corridor outside shook as another blast tore through the canyon. Syrah and Bram moved as one, pushing through the narrow entrance into the morning glare. Jagged rocks cast broken shadows, turning every step into a risk. In the distance, the power core's tower pulsed with warning lights, a beacon and a target all at once. A new sound cut through the chaos, chanting, frenzied and discordant, echoing off stone. Followers of the Night Maw surged into view, wild-eyed and robed in tattered remnants, faces painted in ash and blood. They moved with fanatic purpose, brandishing scavenged rifles, pulse grenades, even machetes forged from mining scraps. Their leader's voice rose above the others, promising the Night Maw's return, the end of Terran rule. Bram and Sira slid behind a boulder, breath mingling in the tight space. He glanced at her, nodding once. "Ready?" She answered by drawing the blade, the metal humming as if eager for violence. "Always." The cultists crashed forward in a ragged wave. Sira launched herself into their midst, moving with a dancer's grace and a predator's speed. The blade gleamed, arcs of light trailing every strike. She cut through energy-dampening shields with contemptuous ease, slicing weapons in half, severing limbs, turning shrieks of defiance into howls of pain. The blade felt alive in her hands, amplifying her will, channeling her fury into each perfect, devastating motion. Bram fought at her side, a living wall of muscle and resolve. His hammer swept through the cultists with crushing force, breaking bones and armor alike. He guarded Sira's back without thought, swinging low to knock enemies off their feet, then high to shatter a makeshift shield. Sparks flew, the sound of metal on metal and the thud of flesh against stone. Their teamwork was seamless, a wordless language of trust and necessity. Sira darted forward, drawing fire and attention. Bram flanked, smashing through defenses. When a pulse grenade arced toward them, Sira twisted, the blade flicking it away with a ringing note. Bram seized the opening, slamming his hammer into a cultist's chest, sending him sprawling into his fellows. "Let your fury guide you. The blade will answer," Bram shouted, his voice rising above the din. Sira embraced the heat in her veins, her discipline surrendering to rage. The blade thrummed louder, answering her call. She moved like a storm, parrying grenades, shattering rifles, scattering cultists with every whirl and lunge. Her enemies fell back, terrified of the impossible weapon and the woman wielding it. But it was Bram who caught her eye as the fight raged. He adapted with impossible speed, using the environment, slamming a hammer blow into a support beam to collapse an overhang, snatching a dropped shield to protect Sira's flank, wrenching a rifle from a cultist and tossing it aside with contempt. In him, she saw not just brute force, but cunning and resilience, a man who shaped chaos into advantage, who made survival itself an art. The skirmish burned hot and brief. Bodies sprawled in the dust, groaning or silent. The air reeked of ozone and blood. Sira's chest heaved, sweat mingling with the tang of iron and ash. Bram's knuckles bled, but his grin was fierce and triumphant. Adrenaline sizzled between them, thickening their bond. Sira's gaze caught Bram's, and for a heartbeat, the world shrank to just the two of them, the memory of last night's passion still echoing in the space between heartbeats. "Not bad for a Terran," Sira teased, voice raw with exhaustion and exhilaration. Bram wiped blood from his lip, eyes twinkling. "Not bad for a Terran either." He jerked his head toward the power core, where more cultists could be seen regrouping near the entrance to the underground shafts. But this was just the opening act. They moved, swift and silent, ducking through alleys and broken corridors. Bram led the way, his memory of the mines and tunnels guiding them through twists and shadowed dead ends. Sira followed close, the blade ready, senses stretched taut. They slipped through a collapsed loading bay, then down a half-buried stairwell into the darkness below the core. Here, the air was cooler, the walls slick with condensation. Pipes rattled above, and the hum of the power core vibrated through their bones. Bram signaled for silence, then pointed to a map scrawled on the wall. Old mining shafts, service tunnels, forgotten routes from another age. Sira pressed her hand to his. "Traps?" He nodded. Old ones, reactive charges, tripwires, but I know where to set new ones. He unslung a satchel from his belt, revealing a scatter of explosive charges and razor wire. We'll bottleneck them, force them into the open. You take the lead, I'll cover the flanks. They worked together, quick and efficient. Syrah moved ahead, planting charges where the passage narrowed. Bram looped wire across the corridor, rigging pressure plates from salvaged circuit boards. Their communication was silent. A nod here, a gesture there, eyes meeting to confirm intent. Each understood the other without words. Footsteps echoed ahead. More cultists, drawn by the promise of the core. Syrah pressed herself into shadow, blade ready. She could hear their leader now, spitting curses, promising the Nightmaw's blessing to any who breached the heart of the Terran settlement. Bram motioned for patience. They waited, breath held, until the first cultist triggered a wire. The explosion was sharp and vicious, shrapnel tearing through robes and flesh. Syrah leapt from hiding, blade singing, Bram's hammer swinging in perfect counterpoint. The fight was swift, desperate. The cultists fought like cornered beasts, but Syrah and Bram were relentless, their connection deepened by the adrenaline thundering through their blood. Between bursts of violence, they retreated deeper into the mine, laying new traps, anticipating the cultists' next move. At each junction, Bram paused, mapping routes, thinking 2 steps ahead. Syrah trusted him utterly, following, guarding, slashing down any who slipped through their defenses. Their bond was a lifeline. Syrah moved with absolute faith in Bram's protection, while Bram relied on Syrah's uncanny reflexes and lethal skill. They became a force of nature, unstoppable, indivisible. At the last barricade, Syrah wiped blood from her blade, breath coming fast. Bram laid a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "We don't need fair, we need final," Bram said, voice a low promise. Syrah nodded, her eyes fierce. The path ahead was dangerous, but together they were ready to end this. From a jagged ledge above the canyon, Bram and Syrah pressed flat against the wind-scoured stone, watching chaos unfold below. Cultists filled the ravine by the score, ragged banners snapping, voices raised in fevered chants, shadows flickering across the dust as they worked with frantic hands. Charges were being planted in clusters at the power core's base, their blinking lights a promise of devastation. At the center of the frenzied storm stalked Morvek, a hulking, 4-armed giant clad in tattered Terran armor, his crimson skin marred by inky veins that pulsed with something unnatural. The Nightmaw's corruption had twisted him, but Syrah recognized the gait, the posture, a ghost from her past. Bram's jaw tensed as he surveyed the scene. "They'll bring the whole place down, we don't have time." Syrah's knuckles whitened on the blade. Morvek leads them. He was once Terran before the beast found him. "Then we break their line before they can finish," Bram said, eyes searching the rockfall above the cultists. "You take the charge, draw their eyes. I'll handle the landslide." Syrah nodded, the plan forming wordlessly between them. She touched Bram's shoulder, gratitude, trust, and a promise of return. He squeezed her hand once, then disappeared along the ledge, moving with a miner's surety among the loose shale. She waited for Bram's signal, a sharp whistle, barely audible over the cultists' frenzy. Then the earth rumbled. Bram's hammer crashed into a fault line, sending a torrent of boulders and grit tumbling down. The cultists scattered, shouts turning to screams as stone thundered through their ranks, crushing explosives and bodies alike. Syrah leapt from the ledge, the blade blazing in her grasp. She was a streak of silver and fire, moving with impossible speed. The cultists tried to regroup, zealots with shock spears, shield-bearers forming a ragged line, but Syrah cut through them like a storm. The blade sang, its resonance amplifying her fury and resolve. Energy shields flickered and died at its touch. Armor parted, flesh yielding as if the metal itself recognized Syrah's right to end this. "Out of my way!" she shouted, her voice carrying above the chaos. A zealot lunged. She parried, twisted, drove the blade through his chest, the weapon humming with every heartbeat. Bram was a whirlwind of destruction at the canyon's edge, smashing charges beneath his hammer, sending any who approached him sprawling. He ripped wires from detonation packs, swung his hammer in great arcs to shatter shields and break skulls. Twice, cultists tried to flank him. Both times Bram pivoted, crushing one beneath his boot and hurling another over the rocks. Grit and sweat coated his arms, but his resolve was unshakable. Then Morvek roared, an inhuman sound that froze every soul in the canyon. He strode forward, towering above the cultists, his 4 arms each gripping a different weapon: plasma axe, shock chain, serrated blade, a jagged club of bone. Nightmaw corruption gleamed in his amber eyes, the vestige of Terran pride warped into malice. "Sira!" Morvek bellowed, his voice thick with memory and pain. "You always were the clan's favorite. Now you'll kneel before the true power." Sira circled, blade ready. "You are not the Morvek I knew. I'll give you peace, if you can take it." He charged, all 4 arms a blur. Sira ducked beneath the plasma axe, feeling the heat scorch her cheek. She rolled aside as the bone club shattered stone where her head had been. Their blades clashed, the sound shattering the air, metal on metal, purpose on madness. Morvek fought with monstrous strength, but Sira's speed was unearthly, guided by the impossible blade's will. She parried the shock chain, countered with a diagonal slash. Morvek's lower left arm fell away, blood and black ichor spraying. For a heartbeat, the old Morvek flickered in his gaze, fear, gratitude, a glimmer of the man he had been. Sira hesitated only an instant. "Forgive me," she whispered, and drove the blade through his heart. The Nightmaw's corruption recoiled, but the weapon's light flared, searing the darkness from Morvek's eyes as he crumpled, finally at peace. The cultists faltered, leaderless. Shouts turned to cries of panic as they scattered into the shadows, abandoning weapons, faith, and cause. Bram crushed the last detonator, chest heaving as he scanned for more threats. But a new cold swept the canyon, a breath that stilled the dust and silenced the wind. The ground trembled, stones rattling as a shadow peeled itself from the cavern wall. The Nightmaw had come. It rose, impossibly tall, 8 feet of midnight black scales, each plate edged in bone. Spines jutted from its back, and amber eyes burned with alien intelligence, cruel and calculating. Its presence was suffocating, pressing on every mind, freezing muscle and breath with a single guttural roar. The cultists dropped to their knees, whimpering in terror. Sira gripped the blade until her knuckles ached. The weapon vibrated, alive with energy and hope, a resonance that steadied her trembling heart. Bram stepped up beside her, hammer raised, his presence grounding her fear. "Stay with me," he said, voice steady. "It's just a beast, Sira, and you are more than its nightmare." The Nightmaw lunged. Its claws scythed through the air, carving furrows in the stone. Sira dodged, rolling beneath its first strike. The blade met scales, shrieking as metal met energy-dampening hide. For a moment, the weapon faltered. Then Bram's voice cut through the haze. "Trust the forge. Trust yourself." Sira summoned every lesson, every hurt and hope, channeling her will through the blade. It responded, its edge flaring with impossible light. She struck, carving a deep gash through the Nightmaw's flank. Black ichor splattered the earth, hissing where it touched. The beast howled, void energy gathering at its jaws. It spat a torrent of darkness. Sira raised the blade, the energy breaking harmlessly across its surface, light scattering shadow. Bram darted forward, slamming his hammer into the beast's foreleg, drawing its attention, giving Sira the opening she needed. She leapt, agile as a comet, landing atop the Nightmaw's shoulder. It twisted, spines raking her side, pain burning but ignored. Sira drove the blade into the creature's neck, the resonance of hope singing through both of them. The Nightmaw bucked, throwing her free. She hit the ground hard, Bram at her side in an instant. "Again!" he called, eyes blazing. The Nightmaw reared back, jaws yawning wide. Syrah met Bram's gaze, nodding once. She surged forward, Bram guiding her steps with a miner's intuition, dodging each strike, reading the beast's movements before they came. The blade became an extension of her will, a beacon of stubborn defiance. Syrah ducked beneath a sweep of claws, Bram's hammer smashing into the beast's knee. With a final, furious cry, Syrah leapt. She soared, every muscle burning with purpose, every hope condensed into a single moment. She plunged the blade into the Nightmaw's heart. Light exploded, white, blinding, pure. The creature convulsed, roaring in agony, scales shattering as the blade's resonance unraveled the nightmare at its core. Syrah held on, Bram's shout echoing in her ears. Then, with a final shudder, the Nightmaw fell. Defeated, its shadow broken by the impossible will of a Terran smith, a Terran warrior, and the blade they forged together. Silence fell, heavy, absolute. The Nightmaw's body sprawled across shattered stone, its midnight black scales already losing their unnatural sheen, amber eyes dimming into lifeless glass. The oppressive chill that had haunted the canyon evaporated. The few remaining cultists, stripped of their faith and their monster, broke and ran, stumbling over the rubble in their haste to flee the dawn. Nothing moved now but the wind, brushing dust and ash over the battlefield. Syrah staggered back from the beast, the impossible blade still clutched in her hand, breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. For a heartbeat, she stood frozen, unable to believe it was truly over. Then she saw Bram, bloodied but upright, hammer dragging at his side, face split with an exhausted, triumphant grin. Without thinking, she ran to him. He caught her as she leapt into his arms, lifting her clean off the ground, his embrace fierce enough to drive the ache from her limbs. Syrah buried her face in his shoulder, trembling with laughter and relief, feeling the wild beat of his heart. The world narrowed to the two of them, their victory, their bond, their future written in the sweat and blood they'd shared. "Didn't think you'd let me have all the fun, did you?" Bram murmured into her hair. "Next time, you can fight the nightmare beast," she shot back, voice muffled by the crook of his neck. "I'll handle the cultists." He laughed, the sound deep and real, his hands warm and steady at her back. For a long moment they held each other, letting the reality of their survival settle into their bones. They returned to the forge as the sun crested the horizon, painting ardent reach in molten gold. The workshop felt transformed. Every tool, every battered workbench, every ember in the hearth suffused with a new kind of reverence. Syrah paused in the doorway, breath catching. This was where it had begun. Now it was something sacred. Bram eased her inside, guiding her to a stool. His shirt was torn, knuckles split and bruised, a gash running down his forearm, but his attention was fixed on her. He gathered water and clean cloth, his movements unhurried and gentle. "Hold still," he said quietly, dabbing at a cut on her brow. The blood welled bright against her crimson skin. "You took a few close calls." Syrah watched him work, her eyes unguarded for the first time. "I've had worse. You, though, you need stitches." She reached for his arm, her fingers cool and careful as she pressed a cloth to his wound. Bram winced but did not flinch, his gaze meeting hers with that familiar, unbreakable warmth. They tended each other's wounds in the hush that followed, the intimacy of the act deeper than any words. Bram's touch was reverent, tracing the bruises along her jaw, his thumb gently smoothing away blood and soot. Syrah's hands, so deadly moments ago, were now soft as she tied off a bandage, her breath brushing his skin. When the worst of the hurts were cleaned and dressed, Syrah set the blade across her knees, studying the edge in the flickering light. The steel no longer looked alien to her, it felt like an extension of herself. "Your ways are deeper than I imagined," she said, voice soft with wonder. She traced the length of the blade, fingertips lingering on the intricate pattern forged in fire and hope. "This is more than a weapon, it's a promise." Bram smiled, the lines of his face creasing into something boyish, almost shy. It's human nature. We adapt. We create with our whole selves. Every scar, every lesson, they're in there. He watched her, something proud and tender in his gaze. You brought your own fire, Syrah. That's what made it possible. She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed emotion. I came for a weapon to restore my name, but you showed me what honor truly means. Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. I owe you, not just for the blade, but for a new way to live. Bram knelt before her, the back of his hand brushing along her cheek. You don't owe me anything. We forged this together. You gave as much as you took. His smile turned crooked, teasing. Besides, I'm the one who got a second chance at living, thanks to you. She caught his jaw in her hand, thumb brushing a smear of soot from his cheek. Then maybe it's a debt we share. Her eyes lingered on his face, memorizing every line, every scar, every glint of stubborn hope. If you'll have me, Bram, there's much I want to learn, not just of forging, but of being human. He took her hand in his, their fingers fitting as if molded by the same fire. I think I can teach you a few things, he murmured, his smile slow and radiant. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his, letting the world fall away. His lips brushed hers, a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepened with promise, the heat between them a living thing. Their hands wandered, mapping the new territory of skin and trust, forging a bond no blade could sever. Later, they sat side by side, Syrah's head on Bram's shoulder, the blade cradled between them. The forge's fire burned low, painting their faces in gold and crimson, the air thick with the scent of steel and ash. Syrah watched the flames, feeling the steady thrum of life all around her, the whir of the life support towers, the distant laughter of children, the heartbeat of a world remade. This place, she said, voice almost a whisper, is a sanctuary now, for both of us. Bram pressed a kiss to her hair, his arm wrapping her close. We built it, together. The forge was no longer just a workshop. It was a temple, a symbol of their impossible union, human and Terran, fire and steel, creation and connection. Their bond, born in heat and battle, would endure as long as the embers burned and the stars turned above ardent reach. Hand in hand, they faced the future, equal, unbroken, and forever forged in each other's fire. Our story ends here. If you'd like to support us, you can use the Super Thanks button right under the video to leave a tip. It truly helps our team improve the quality of our work. We're grateful to each and every subscriber for being with us. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.